G'day to you. My guest today is Johnny Kendrick from the Rhodesian Artillery. He was a regular sergeant and was posted to quite a number of parts of the country. His synopsis is very interesting. So I'll be picking his brain and helping him lubricate 45, 47-year-old memories. So, John, welcome to the program, man.
Hi, Tony. Yeah, very nice of you to invite me onto the program. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Now, we were chatting off air a little while ago. You're over in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and I'm in Salisbury, Bambazonki, Wiltshire, UK. And you had the storm last night that we've got today. I've just noticed my wife walking out to the motorcar bent at 45 degrees. Uh, trees come down, and my shed's about to go airborne. But you know, the incredible thing is about this country, and we were talking about this off air as well, is that I've been here 22 years and we've only had 3 power failures. And the one power failure lasted an hour and the other 2 lasted 15 minutes. And they even sent an apology for the long delay for the hour. And so I feel sorry for our South African and Zimbabwean brothers and sisters who are out for 20 hours a day. Although I've heard that the South African position has improved a lot. Have you heard that? They haven't had a power failure for a long time.
No, I don't think I have. Haven't been speaking to too many. It's normally when you're watching a rugby match or something, when the stadium lights go out and you say, "Oops, they've got a."
Yeah, they should build stadiums next to the president's house, and then they'd never have a power failure. But
Yeah.
anyway, thank you so much for volunteering your time to come and talk. One of the units I've always been interested in is artillery. I just have an affinity with that lovely old 25-pounder, and you even had the 5.5s from South Africa, not so?
Correct. Yeah, yeah. They came right very late in the war.
That's quite a big shell, a 5.5 inch, eh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, compared to the 25-pounder, it's a completely different beast. And I just wish we had it 4 or 5 years earlier than we got them, because we never really had a chance to let them go.
Yeah. Right. So, as is normal on this program, give us some of your background, where you were raised and all that sort of stuff, and how you ended up in the army.
Sure. Okay. Right. My mom and dad came from the UK originally. They were teachers. My dad, when he came out of the Air Force after the war, posted to Southern Rhodesia in about late 1948 as a headmaster of Enkeldoorn's primary school, right in the heartland.
Oh,
Comes this English, well, a Welshman,
oh my
and
word.
yeah, they spent a couple of years there, and then they moved off to what is now known as Cashel, was Tandai in those days, up in the eastern Highlands, Manicaland. Um, then that's when I came along in those sort of years, 58. But as a baby, I remember seeing cine cameras, cine reels that my mom had of me being nursed by all the girls in the hostel, and it was quite embarrassing later on in years when you bumped into those same schoolgirls in Umtali saying, "We used to change your nappies." So, and then from there he went to Rasapi, John Cowie. That's where he was more known for his John Cowie. I think 17 or 18 years he was headmaster there. So I grew up in Rasapi, which was a great little town, especially around January for the Rasapi River boat race. And then went to high school as a boarder in Umtali at Umtali Boys High School. Didn't last too long at school. Got to O levels, flunked them badly because I didn't pay attention in class. I think I was at the deputy headmaster every Friday for Dux. But when I took myself out of school very young, 16 and a half, I suppose, Tony, and 17, maybe somewhere around there, and thought I'll go and join the army before. Go and do my call up before I get my call up papers. And my father was quite annoyed at me take myself out of school and said, "Well, on one condition, you join the police." I said, "Hey, hang on, yeah, I don't want to be SAP. I want to go to do my national service." But he talked me into it, so I went for the selection course at Morris Depot, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it was a day sort of selection. Fortunately, I got a lift up with 2 of my old schoolmates who were in the police and gave me all the tips on how to flunk that. So I flunked another exam with flying colours, and then I had to write off to, I think, was it called the Ministry of Defence, or
Yeah.
am I think,
Yeah, correct.
I said, can you send me my call-up papers? Probably one of a few. Got them, got on the train from Umtali, free ticket to Llewellyn. So, yeah, that 2 days on the train, basically, it was a mighty big booze up. But what a wake-up call when we landed at Heaney Junction at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you stepped out with a mighty hangover, and the shouting started. And I just thought to myself, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
So Llewellyn wasn't nice. I didn't like it at all.
I think we were all colloquially referred to as fresh puss, with a very descriptive F word in front of that, you know.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, all the things about, you know, what they would do to your ear if you don't, you know, trying to keep it clean on the program.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks at Llewellyn in those tin shacks and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, no light bulbs, trying to have a shave with those god awful bloody razors, no plugs, no hot water, running everywhere you had to go, you had to bloody run. And I just said to myself, Jesus, there's got to be a better place than this. Lo and behold, here comes the regular army sign-up crew, you know, get you at your worst ebb. And I thought, well, 3 years, I get to go home, because I had to go home to get my dad to sign an affidavit because I was still under 18, I think it was. And so I said, yeah, bring me that piece of paper. Off I went, got a train to Salisbury, paid for by the government. Hitchhiked to Umtali, had a weekend off, got absolutely ratted. Got my dad to sign the documents and arrived at SAS on the Monday morning. What a difference. Geez, from Llewellyn to a regular position, and particularly SAS, which is, as we all know, a renowned unit. Just the instructors were different, completely different. Yeah, they were hard, but they wanted you to do well. You know, they taught. I mean, I remember on a Sunday having a rest, sort of a couple of hours, and sitting down, and the corporals would give you any advice you went and asked them for. They wouldn't treat you like a piece of muck. But and I enjoyed it, but somehow I don't think I had the fitness or anything, you know, and I was struggling a bit. And this is when SS was still at old Cranbourne Barracks before they moved to Kubrit. Was it Kubrit?
Kubrit, yeah.
Yeah. And the drill square was next to a football pitch. And on that football pitch is where artillery did their gunnery training. And I was stomping and crushing beetles on the drill square one day, and I looked over and saw all these guns lined up, and I thought, and something clicked, and the gun appealed to me. That, I don't know what it was at the time, but I said, that's where I want to be. You know, I've got 3 years, and that's where I want to be. So that day, I signed out of that course and moved over to artillery. And at the time, now I may be wrong, so I'm just going on a bit of memory. The only regulars in artillery were NCOs and officers, and national service guys came in, did their call-ups and disappeared, and then came back as territorials. There was no regular gunners in the mid 75, 74, 75 in artillery. So I was amongst a few guys that were the first regular gunners at Rhodesian Artillery. Which is something I felt quite proud about all through my time there. It was much better. Different training was different, and the my sergeant major at artillery, John Bolter, tremendous soldier. I think he went down to South Africa and spent another 20 years in the South African artillery there. But he was some boy. He was another shouter, but you listened to him, you know. He just got your attention in the right ways.
So did you have to do basic infantry training before you learned the guns, or was that just sort of secondary there?
It was a secondary thing. You know, I'd done 2 or 3 weeks in Llewellyn. I'd done 2 or 3 weeks again at SAS. So, but the same basics, just at SAS it was much better and more, you know, learning about getting you fit, of course. The RLI assault course, we were never off the bloody thing. And just getting to know your gun, your rifle, the FN, and how to use it properly. That was, from what I can remember, that was just drilled into you, you know. We had little tin barracks, the worst they're worse than Llewellyn, to be honest. I remember having a clean out one day. We took everything out and put the fire hose into the damn thing to wash it down, which it was so. But we used to, even during the basics, we used to get a few cold beers out the back of the wing stagger there, you know. But going back to artillery, yeah, we went straight into gunnery. So all gunnery for 6 weeks.
Take us through that. So, John, what did it involve learning how to operate a field gun?
Okay, so with artillery, there's two sections, you can call it. So you've got your technical side, and then you've got the gunnery side. So I went on to the gunnery side. Your technical side is all the guys that do the surveying of the gun positions and convert information coming back from OPs during an op and send out all your information to the guns so the guns can set themselves for fire. And I'll cover a fire mission a little later on in the program. So yeah, the gunnery was just it was an awful lot of hard work, because them 25-pounders are not light things to move around. They only got 2 wheels and a trailer, and a gun crew is 6 men. I don't think I ever went on one operation where I had 6 men on a crew. You know, we were always short-staffed. So, you know, as long as you had 4 or 5 is ideal. 6 probably you had a sleeper somewhere. He was just in between. But yeah, so you did a lot of learning about the gun. The first week I can remember, it was just parts of the gun and how they work on distance firing, because 25-pounder maximum distance is probably about 13 kilometers, but its operating distance would have been somewhere around 9 Ks, I would think, would be your most accurate. When you go in 13 Ks, you're on full charge, supercharge, and the guns are facing up like that, and those rounds can go a little bit wayward. So you don't do what we call a danger close fire, which is danger close was you're dropping rounds within 50 yards, 50 meters of your own troops. So
wow,
yeah. So yeah, so the training was all about gunnery.
Tell us about the charges that you. Now, am I correct in saying that the head of the shell goes in independently of the charge? They're like little sacks that go in behind.
Yeah. So we'll talk about 25-pounders. I can come on to the 5.5 howitzers later, but the 25-pounder, you got a projectile. Mm-hmm. Okay, the projectile is, we would have always used HE, high explosive, or smoke, different colored. They have forget the name now. Your cap on the top is not connected to the projectile until you fire in a mission, and so that's separate. So your cartridge, you have on the 25-pounder, you have a cartridge case. In that cartridge case, you have 3 bags: red, white, and blue, I think they were, and those depicted 1, 2, or 3 charge. So if you were firing close range and you only needed 1 charge, there was a plug at the top of the cartridge case which you pulled out, and you took out the appropriate bags you didn't need, or left 1 in or 2 in, or all 3. And then your supercharge was a sealed carcass case, which was just no bags inside, just full of cordite. So little things just come to mind now. During training, about halfway through, the territorial troop was going on an action exercise up north on the northern border, and they were short of ammunition guys, so they had to take from the training troop, which I was in, and I was stuck my hand up. I want to get on this, but we hadn't got to the ammunition side of training yet. And I can remember in the middle of a fire mission, I was just the intermediate, passing the rounds to the number 2 who puts them into the breach, and I bloody dropped the friggin' projectile. And you know, in that split second, you drop in it and you think, I'm going to blow the whole bloody place up here. But with the 25-pounder, even though you've got the cap on the top, it has a lock nut on it, which is open with the rifling of the barrel. So as the round spins at high velocity, that lock undoes, and then the pin can go down and hit the detonator. But I hadn't been taught that yet. I thought I was going to blow the whole lot up.
Oh my word!
It was a funny little moment, I thought.
So tell us, what you have 6 guys. tell us what number 1 does, number 2, number 3, number 4.
Okay, so I'll back up a little bit. So predominantly you operate in a troop. A troop is 4 guns, a battery 8 guns. The only battery I went operating in was in that battle group that was formed right at the end, and we had a battery of 5.5s in that battle group. We went through Chitungwiza down through to Marandellas, and then we got called up to Kotwa when there was a bit of shit in that when they flew in that to go and talk to them. Anyway, back so troop of guns, 4 guns, 6 guys on a gun. So your number 1 would be your guy in charge. Normally a corporal, we call them bombardiers, so a lance bombardier or a bombardier. Number 2 is 3, 4, and 5 were ammo guys. Number 3 was your sighter. So he sat on his little chair there and he did all the sights. You had 3 guys in ammos and 1 on the breech block. So opening and closing, taking the rounds out. So 6 guys predominantly, but mostly we would operate with a 1, 3, 5, and 5 done away with, 4 and 6. So 4 guys. You can. It depends, if you find. So with 4 guns on a troop, when you're on a fire mission, normally they use the 4 guns would sight, but 1 gun would fire around until you were on target, and then they would call for 4 guns to fire. And generally, it's 3 rounds fire for effect. So each gun's firing 3 rounds, so 12 rounds would go off. Okay, if the OPs weren't sure where their target was, which was always what we loved doing, was a 9-round fire for effect in a pattern. So each gun you set up in a diamond shape, and each gun would fire off 9 rounds in a pattern, and then those patterns interlink. So you cover a vast, each round is dropping 50 yards. I'm going to break into yards here because that's how it was all set up.
Yeah.
Was 50 yards apart. So you could imagine 25-pounder rounds dropping, and it's quite quick fire. And we always used to have one of the sayings, there's 1 for the cookhouse, and you throw an extra round in, you wind the barrel up max and just hit the tit and off it goes. And as long as there's no friendly forces on the other side, you don't give a crap where that lands,
And what was the maximum fatal shrapnel range on a round?
Hard to tell, because it dispersed broadly after close, you'd probably look in 20, 30 yards, pieces of shrapnel, because it's a heavy round. And the shrapnel pieces, I didn't see too much shrapnel. We packed up and went back to Salisbury. We didn't see the target zones. Only on the bombing range in Katanga did we see the results of that. And it's hard, it would have been really nice to get guys, infantry guys that were on one of the ops that we were supporting them with, to come back and debrief us and say, this is what happened. Because maybe there was that, but it didn't feed down to the lower ranks. Might have been with the higher officers, but it didn't feed down to us, because I suppose it's the age now, and communication. You realize communication is the key to everything. And if we had got a lot more feedback, we might have been able to improve on how we sent our rounds over to support these guys. But that was the case. But I would say you could get. Yeah, sorry,
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
tell me now, if you're you got a troop of 4, is that right?
Yeah.
And 1 fires the initial ranging round or whatever.
Yeah.
How did the other 3 know where to fire? Have you all got the same aiming pole?
Yeah. So when you set up the 4 guns, now I'm going to get a bit lost here. So you surveyed into the position, and you're given your survey points from your technical team. But when you set up your guns, you set it up at 0, and you have 2 posts set back or slightly to the side of you, black and white marked, I think, and sometimes when you're in heavy bush, it's hard to find. So what you're doing as a number 1 of the gun, your duty is to call out all the instructions to your number 3 as you hear them from the command post. That's where JB Bolter came in handy, because he had the loudest voice. And you're pretty switched on as a number 1, so you know which way your trail's going to move, left or right, because the gun is on a platform and it can spin. And then what happens is your number 3 is looking through his sights backwards to those 2 poles, and they have to line up.
Yeah.
Okay. And you move in the tail so he gets it, and he'll instruct you left, right by hand movements, hand signs. It's all hand signs. And then once he's lined up, then you're ready to go. So that's how you set your gun. It's all about what technical information comes from the command post. But when we're sighting a position and one gun is firing, he's loading and firing. But each adjustment, all 4 guns are making that adjustment and standing by with the round. They don't load until the sighting gun is on target, and now they need to neutralize the target. Somebody will make a call on how many rounds they'll do, and it'll be 2 rounds fire for effect, 3 rounds fire for effect, 4 whatever it is, and all you do then is all 4 guns start firing. Boom, 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 boom. With your number 3 making sure he's keeping those crosshairs on his 2 little posts at the back all the time. Maybe when the guns kick in, especially if you haven't bedded in and you find your round the first time, it's going to be a bit loose on the ground. He has to sit at you, and the number 1 will make a few adjustments there, and they can get off. Look, Tony, I can't quite remember what the round per minute is, but it depends on your crews. But you can get them off. We got them off pretty quickly. 5 round fire for effect, 12, 15 rounds of a 25 pounder would be a couple of minutes gone.
So I once walked into the control vehicle of RT guys up at Vic Falls. I went and had a cup of tea with them.
Yeah.
And all sorts of radio equipment and shelves and tables and all. So let me get this right. If an OP sitting up on the hill, whoever he is, Silly Scout, RLI, whatever, RR guy, he says, "Hey, I've got 25 tours down there. Here are the grid reference, blah, 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 through the door, up the thing on the map." He radios that through to your van, and then he sits there. He knows where you guys are, so he will give you the bearings to that. And that's basically what he does in that van. Is that right?
Yeah, he'll give you a grid reference off his map. Okay. Now, I may be wrong here, but the guns just couldn't fire if a bloke called them to fire. There was protocol, and it used to annoy us at times, and particularly in Umtali, where the static gun positions were. Jesus, they had to go through some loopholes to let go with the guns, to protect Umtali. Anyway, yeah. So. So your OP will call out a grid reference of a target, for instance. Now, if the guns without any training for that, it's probably the same with the mortars. If an OP is just saying, Jesus, he gets his grid reference spot on, but now you've got to bring a gun into position, because there's a lot of effects, because elevations between guns and target, that's all taken into account when you set up your gun position by your technical guy. But if, for instance, the guns are sitting south, the target's north, and your OP is on the east, and you're firing with that one gun. Now, each time they might need an adjustment, and so they'll, so the OP has to say left 50 yards, right 50 yards, up, down. But it can be confusing if he's calling it from his position or from the gun's position.
Yeah.
So if you're facing guns are south and the target's north, but he needs to drop you by saying drop 100 yards, he might be saying he's thinking it's the other way around, and then suddenly the rounds are off target quite a bit. And that was quite prevalent in Op Miracle when we had to have a go at the tanks that were the T-55s that were coming up from Chimoio. Yeah, we eventually got on top of them.
I'm looking forward to you talking about that episode. So tell us, when your training was eventually done, what happened after that?
Okay, so they formed, what they wanted to do, I think, was form 2 troops in Depot Rhodesian Artillery, Troop A and Troop B. And ideally, I think they were looking for a national service troop and a full regular troop. but the numbers were short, so we kind of intermingled between the two. The regular troop would have been most regular, so we would have spent a lot of time at depot headquarters, but we would have gone on a lot of ops as well, and that was the best part of it, because you're in and out and gone. You weren't stuck at Impala Arms for bloody 6 weeks, bloody counting crows, or drinking Impala Arms dry.
Yeah.
But the 5 or 6 years I was involved there, I spent time in every static gun position we had, which was, Vic Falls, Charlie, Villa Salazar. We were there. I was down there a couple of times. So it was great, man. It was really great being in artillery in those days.
Yeah, because you've got your tents there. You can have a cup of tea. You wait for the action to start, and you have a slam bam, thank you, ma'am, and then you back to your cup of tea. Whereas the infantry would be groveling around, wiping their asses. So tell me, was there a shortage of ammo in your unit?
No, whenever we went on an op, our ammo was all kept at Incoma Barracks. And sometimes when they had nothing for us to do, they used to send us out there to bloody pack and stack and Jesus, it was the worst ever, because you weren't allowed to take smokes in there, and every bugger smoked in those days. I don't recall there being a shortage of 25-pounder ammo. I recall there being a shortage on the position when we were in a fire mission, but I'll talk about that later. But I don't think so, Tony. I never really heard that. We were Minows. We just do as you're told.
Yeah.
I never didn't take enough ammo on a job until I went out of the country with Op Miracle.
That was for the politicians and the generals to sort out. They had to go and have cups of tea with President Bush and all that and say, send us another 1,000,000 rounds of ammo or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm keen to start hearing about some of your actual deployments. Can you tell us your first one where you saw action?
Yeah. It was that first one with when I was in training. That was the first time I actually heard the guns firing before I had never even been on the range with the damn thing. But the first one, it was wild. It was up north again. We did a lot of firing into Zambia. And I was too young and naive and not a person who gets told much. You just went on these ops, did your bit, and came back to camp. Got pissed at club tomorrow. But I don't know why I don't have a lot of recollections of some of these ops we did, because they were like sorties. You sat on a gun position down in, say, Villa Salazar. Villa Salazar, you got quite a bit there, because the scouts were always causing nonsense across the way in Malvernia there, and then the gooks would fire on the little town, and then they would highlight their positions, and the guns would have a go at them. We did a couple of sorties out of our gun positions. Took 2 guns up to sort out something at a protected village outside of down the southeast there. Those were quite good contacts from the RT point. I remember firing off the main. We just positioned the guns right on the main road, on the tarmac, down to Bite Bridge, yeah. And we fired on a protected village. Was getting stonked badly, and they needed some support. And so we just ran up the road, put 2 guns on the tarmac, and let go. That was good fun. But again, the INTAF guys had no clue of OP and guiding our rounds in. I think we hit the embankments a couple of times.
Tell us the first time you actually fired the guns in anger. What was the feeling like? Were the guys all hyped up and excited? And it must have been a different dimension from your training.
It was, adrenaline's an amazing thing. I'm pretty sure when you hit a contact for the first time, there are blokes out there, I'm pretty sure, but the first time you hit a contact, you shit yourself. And then the adrenaline and the training it doesn't come straight away. It always takes a while to come in. And when we went on our first full troop deployment, and you're waiting, the anticipation is unbelievable. You say, we used to have, when it gets nearer the time, and you get feedback from your sergeant that it's imminent that the guns are going to be fired. So you effers better be ready. I don't want any cock-ups on this. You get that speech, and then you start taking the projectiles, because they used to come in tin boxes, 2 rounds or 4 rounds. Okay, we prefer the 2 rounds because it's 50 pounds. It's a 25 pounder. It weighs 25 pounds. So 4 is 100 pounds. They're hard to bloody lug in and out of bloody, because you have to put them in bunkers and store them correctly, in case a mortar comes in. We used to take them out the boxes and start writing on them. Good wishes, and some of the things we used to write on there, eat this for breakfast, boys, those sort of things, not very nice for somebody receiving them, but during the Hondo, it was brilliant. And that's what I can remember. That the adrenaline, I was an ammo number, right? Loading the gun. So you're flat out all the time. And I can just remember, you just didn't think about anything else. Your number 3 and your number 1 are the guys that are putting that gun in the right position, so it maximizes, it hits the target. You're just unloading the cartridge, loading the new projectile in, and with a 25 pounder, you just set it up in the breech block and you punch it in with your fist, and then the cartridge comes in. You ram it. We used to have pickhells for the projectile. You ram that in, and then you use your fist to punch the cartridge in and close it, and off it goes. And you just caught up. And I can remember, I remember the taste afterwards in my mouth, the cordite and the dust. And arty guys, you're 9 k's away from the real action, and so you're in shorts and bloody vests, and some of the oaks didn't even have the shirts on because you get fire mission troop. That's the call. HE117. Now you're in action. That's HE117. That's your round going in, and it's over. And then you wait, and you start getting the feedback comes back to the command post, and then they say, right, stand down. And you kind of it's such an anticlimax because it's over so quickly.
It's a bit like having sex, isn't it? You build up to that.
Only better.
Better. Especially when you get older. You sort of build up to that climax and then you have that afterwards, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's what is it. You sit around all day and then you get a fire mission and then it's finished, because the bigger fire missions, particularly up north, and Chipinge, we were stationed, we've had the guns there a couple of times now in the tier states, in amongst the tier states. But I remember on one occasion, they brought in, there was a particular piece of land across the board, which got the nickname as Freddy's Ridge. And they brought in an old Russian Stalin's organ. And I remember something that it couldn't fire, those Stalin augers would have 40 tubes. So, but they would fire banks of, I think they had 8 banks of 5, something like that. And they could fire a bank of 5 off at one go. But we were lucky enough, this boyo wasn't fully operational, But with artillery, if you're not on flat ground, you try and position your troop, your guns, if there's a bit of a hill, on the reverse side of the hill from your enemies, so that if they're firing any rockets or mortars, it's harder to hit on the reverse side of the hill than on the top or the front side. And I can remember the Stalin has, I think they want 22 millimeter rockets. They were coming over our heads. Jesus, they were coming, just over the crest of the Gomo we were on, and we could hear these. And we knew they were going miles behind us. The tea estates were getting roasted, but we took him out. We got some rounds on top of him and took him out. And again, that was like a day of getting all psyched up for what was happening. Then the shit hits the fan, and then you're sitting down and say, you get the OP saying, you got the bloody effing bastard. Well done, that's coming from maybe a bloke up in the plane or on a gomo somewhere miles away, that you get the feedback like that. But our sergeants never used to come out and saying, yeah, good job. It was just the job, and that was it. So those were good times. You just had these little sorties every now and again where you went off and you did an op and you came back. And that was what the regular troop was all about. We, for want of a better word, we were specialists in doing that, whereas the other troops were had a job to do, Vic Falls, protecting Vic Falls. That was a good stint to get up there. I remember being, I was a sergeant, no, I was a bombardier then. Said, Bombardier Kendrick would like you to go on operation duty. Oh, yes, please, I'll go on ops. So you sat on the booze cruise while it went up the river and back, because you'd call out we had certain positions along the river. So not the whole troop, but one gun would be following the booze cruise, targets on the other side, on the Zambian side. So we used to sit there in civvies and a radio at our feet, looking like tourists and drinking like tourists. God knows if I had to call in the guns, we would have been, because you didn't have to call any grid references, because I think we had the grid references referenced already. So passing target 1, target 2, target 3, and I suppose that was it. So, and Vic Falls, you got a night out every now and again, so you went into town. I remember on one occasion we got really, really tanked and at Vic Falls, and oh Jesus, I got close to court martial because we were stuck in the town, and the gun position was 5 or 6 miles out of town. How are we going to get there? And I seen this lone 2.5 sitting in the car park. 2.5s you could start with a bloody sucker stick. So I said, come on, lads. We started up and he drove the thing back. That's how we got him. But it was some fancy bloody bloke with shit on his shoulders there. He was not a happy bunny, but I had a good sergeant major who kept me out of the stocks, as they say. But those are the fun times of it.
That brings back incredible memories for me, because I was based at Vic Falls as the platoon commander of 2RR mortars up on the hill at the back of the ruins of the Elephant Hills Hotel. And we did the same thing. Guys used to fight like crazy to be the forward fire officer on the booze cruise. And they used to just about kill each other because they wanted to go in civvies and chat the girls up. And it was a constant battle. I want to go. He's been twice, and what a fantastic place to be based, hey? Having a bit of
all the croupiers, there was hundreds of them there.
Well, yes, I mean, it only sergeants and above could go in the casino. So all the good-looking troopies, they were never any opposition to us. We could go in there, and pick the lot. And now this brings me to an interesting question. Were you there that night when that big crossing happened in 1979 and artillery took out the boats on the opposite shore coming across?
Yeah, we would. I only fired once in Vic Falls. Now I don't know if it was that time or not, but I do know. I don't think it was that big crossing. I don't think I was there at that time. I think it was a national service crew. I know when I was up at Vic Falls, we didn't do a full 6 or 8 week call up there because we were pulled out of there and swapped with the national service team because we were taken down on an op to go down to Villa Salazar. And I think that's the time after I left there. I went to Villa Salazar and killed bloody donkeys, and the guns hit a big crossing. I remember. Yeah, no, I didn't see that.
I know artillery also fired up at Kasangula, the very extreme northwestern part of the country. There were several operations there. If I'm not mistaken, the 5.5s fired up there. It was turning into quite a conventional war at one stage, which I'm embarrassed to say I started a few months earlier, and it just continued. And but yeah, they had to get the SAS in over there and blow a few people up to quieten them down. But I know RT was up there having a wonderful time. I think with Don Price, that was a few months after my scene. But yeah, a wonderful place to be based. It's probably the most wonderful period of my memories, actually. And that brings back an interesting question. I know that the Zambians were given Green Archer by the Brits.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Green Archer is a radar system that picks up incoming shells or mortar rounds and targets your firing point. And I think I'm correct in saying that the guys on our side had to keep moving their position, fire a few rounds and move, maybe not so much with artillery, but certainly with mortars, because they had a very sophisticated response system there. And did a lot of damage to the police station, which was obviously static. But did you ever encounter anything like that or be warned of it during?
No, Tony. One thing I can say, in all the gun positions I operated from, we never got stonked once, apart from Freddie's Ridge, and they were missing us by miles. Because the trajectory of the rocket was low and flat. So once it cleared the crest of the Gomo we were on, it was going way behind us. And that was the closest we got. We never had mortar fire on us because, the combination of artillery fire onto a camp plus our infantry going in, it didn't give much chance, to retaliate further than contact level, infantry contact level. So no, we at times you wondered if you were in the war, because you sat around doing bugger all day in a gun position, and that's why artillery was used in the early days before I joined. They were used quite a lot in infantry roles, and it was with that in mind in my time now that my one of my best mates in the army, late now, very, very good soldier and a gentleman, Ray Beamish. Yeah, dead and he got killed right in there. But himself and a stick, and my very good friend from school, were picked up from a gun position when the Hunyani went down, and they were involved in stop group contact, and ballistics confirmed that they got 9 kills between them, and it's something. From an artillery point of view, we were really, really proud to have had our men involved in it, because that was a disaster.
For our foreign viewers, the Hunyani was either the first or second four-engine Viscount that was shot down southeast of Kariba, and you guys were sent in as a response unit to try and find the people that did that, the terrorists that did that. And do you know whether that just happened to be a group in the area, or did you ever have proof that they were part of the gang?
I extracted a bit of information out of one of the. I found it on a site somewhere, and it was like my mate AJ Arles, who was involved in it, said, "Oh, there was always a lot of things that Artie didn't do this, and Artie, you know what it's like."
Yeah,
but ballistics. They confirmed that I think there was 12 members of that particular gang, and that it was proved that they were part or complete group that shot down the Viscount. That these men that were killed, there was a couple of guys got away wounded and died later and so on, but kills on the spot were 9 accredited to the artillery guys. And we just felt so strong about that because it was there was so many attacks on our civilian population, especially the farmers. But those 2 Viscounts seemed to hit home more than anything with me anyway.
I know when it was announced on the radio that the feeling I got from our mates and all that is that everybody just wanted to go get fully mobilized, go to war, and completely smash up Zambia, and the anger was palpable throughout the whole country.
Yeah, it was a catalyst to inspire us to go further.
Yeah,
we just never had the support. Unfortunately,
there was, by the grace of God, and Sam 7 was found at Vic Falls by a clearance patrol that went around the airport. They went into the bush there. I can't remember. It was probably Don Price's guys. I can't remember. But obviously they were planning to shoot down the plane at Vic Falls, and it was really just a miracle that they never had the opportunity.
And from a strategic point of view, you can we don't want to support innocents being killed, but that's what terrorists do. They go after the weak. They're cowards.
Yeah.
And but if you put their hat on, you can understand that places like that are easy targets. And the Kariba was evidence of that.
It's
And I'm
it's the Maoist philosophy of revolutionary change. If you kill one person, you scare to death 10,000 people,
yeah,
and therefore that was their sort of modus operandi. Kill people, dreadful deaths, dreadful murders to scare the hell out of people. And in many ways, it was very effective because the immigration accelerated and people were scared and frustrated by what was going on. It got to the point where we were losing a battalion of men a year or a month or something
yeah,
in terms of manpower. So we
yeah.
became very stretched. But let's go back to you briefly touched on Villa Salazar. I've interviewed other guys like Roy Pitchford, who was there with 2RR mortars. He had a wonderful time. And for me personally, I, I would love to have been there. I'm not trying to sound brave or anything, but I get inspired by that sense that you're alone in the middle of nowhere, and it's almost like the old Afrikaner lager. You're there, you're fighting off the enemy, and you must have had an interesting time at Villa Salazar.
Well, Villa Salazar was. I just love the name Villa Salazar. You
Yeah,
know, if I may, Tony, the one time I was on a camp there, uh, we had now we were the actual. I don't know if you can call it a town, but the border post of Villa Salazar. I think I was in it twice. We went for water supply or something like that, you know. But the guns were out to, oh God, east or something like west of them or something like that, you know. But when we were there, now we very rarely, in fact, probably only on one or two occasions did we ever have rear guard protection. Guns are supposed to have rear guard protection, you know. But in Villa Salazar, the one trip I was on, um, we happened to have an RR batch of guys with us. And I happened to be walking through our gun position the one day, and a couple of RR guys were walking through. And I looked at the one guy and I thought, Jesus, AJ, now this is my mate from school who came up to Boys High and joined Boys High from South Africa. And we became the best of mates. And, you know, he went and did his national service at a different time I did. And, you know, after we all left school, never seen him before, I bumped into him. And for the rest of his trip, he spent more time in our camp chatting with us guys and everything like that. And when I got back from that trip, he had signed up with artillery.
fantastic.
He'd come out of Civvy Street and signed up again and joined artillery. But Villa Salazar was interested in because they used to play havoc with the Oaks in Malvernia because I think they used to intercept their mail and then read it out over loudspeakers. And I remember being put on standby one night. He says, "Look, they're gonna ramp things up. They're gonna read out mail, but they're gonna change the word in, you know, like it's from the guy's wife and she's having an affair with his best mate,
Yeah,
and you know, just really get it going." Whether that was true or not, but I can see the logic behind it.
it was
Um,
absolutely true. I've had it confirmed by other guys. Yeah, definitely.
okay, good, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and you know, then the commander of the camp would start firing mortars on Villa Salazar, and that would lighten up their positions, and the guns would have a crack at them, and soon the lights would go off, and that shut up, you know, and that was, and I think they had CCTV on Malvernia from the bunker in Villa Salazar, and they could watch what they're doing. They could watch them walking up the bloody town centre.
I believe so. And Roy Pitchford, when I interviewed him, Major Roy Pitchford, he was in that area for a long time, got the MLM medal, whatever it is, meritorious. He said that they, at one point, they wanted to try and drain the ammunition that the enemy had in Malvernia, so they would pop off at various pre-selected targets, and nothing worked. So eventually, it was decided to make it publicly known to them, sort of, I don't know how they did it over the radio, that there was going to be a feint to the north with the Silly Scouts or something like that. And these guys went absolutely ballistic. They just fired off everything, 122, everything that you can imagine. They just let loose, and it was a phantom attack. And I think little plans like that are really interesting in warfare, where you can deceive the enemy.
Well, I'm not sure if it was the same incident, but I can remember a time down in Villas where we didn't even know it. But the next minute, you know what those Scouts boys were like? They were like ghosts in the night, boy. And these guys just appeared in our gun position. and just had a chat with our sergeant major or sergeant, and then just filtered into the bush. And several hours later, the guns were going. So it could have been much the same, but that's what they're like. They used to go off and get in behind Malvernia and play havoc there. And it must have been a real strategic position for us to defend it the way we did. There was another time I was down there, and the gun position was always in the same place. And on this particular case, I think they were cleaning out a lot. So a lot of the locals were in their protected villages and everything like that, but a lot of the livestock, like donkeys and that, were left out in the bush. And there was a cleanup about knocking off donkeys because the were using them as like pack horses to move stuff around. And we didn't use the guns too much to knock off a odd donkey, but we went out on like hunting trips. We had to shoot the bastard. But they caused a terrible problem. So because when you fire in at short distances, like at villas, you're left with a lot of cordite bags. And you what do you do with them? So we were cutting open the carcasses and filling them with cordite bags, pouring them diesel over these donkeys, and then setting them alight. And when that cordite ignites, it's not an explosion; it just burns at an extremely high temperature and cooked the shit out of the donkeys. And the smell around the place. But we heard stories that the RLI was strapping explosives to the donkeys. Real cruel, but they had to be done. But the way they did it was, it could have been just stories, or it could have happened. But villas again on that particular op as well with the RLI. We did quite a bit of firing. In fact, on that one op, I dare say I'm probably one of the first guns to have an AD with a 25-pounder, because unbeknown to, as I turned my back, my number two, I wasn't the sighting gun, and he loaded the gun. So we had to round up the spout when we shouldn't have, but I just kept stum because I knew fire mission was on the whole troop was coming. So we just held it in there. But on the next sighting, there was a gun next to me. They said fire, and my number three just hit the tit and off went 2 rounds. And the funny thing was, my round was the one that was on target. So everybody had to adjust to us. And the sergeant major, because the first round went off and then it was like a double tap. And he knew straight away. So who the hell's firing another round? And he came roaring out of there. And I kind of try to act sheepishly, but when the smoke's coming out of your barrel, you can't get away from it. I think it cost me a couple of crates, but luckily it wasn't. It was the enemy that paid for it, not one of my own.
Now I believe you had a pub there, and the camaraderie at night must have been incredible. That sort of base at war and the guys chatting and chewing the fat.
Yeah, I think most. What was nice about a long-term gun position, you had fresh rats, so you got supplied every week. You'd meet the ration suppliers. You'd send out a couple of trucks, and villas. I don't think when I was there, they had a bunker there with a pub in it, but Impala Arms was the best. The guys there, they had a tremendous thing, and they used to put on shows at Impala Arms. When I say the guns at Impala Arms, they're about 200 meters up from Impala Arms. So they often used to have nights out, and gun positions could still operate with half the men on it, and the other half a couple of 100 yards down the road. And they used to put on shows, musicals, and people used to come and sit in the hotel, and there were the arty guys in camo kits singing and joking and stand-up comedy and all sorts of things. They were very well entertained, I must admit.
So Impala Arms was right there at Villa Salazar, was it?
No, sorry, Impala Arms at Umtali, but Villa
right.
Salazar, they didn't. I don't know how long they had a gun position down in Villas, whether they had a long enough to build a pub in there. It would have been out of railway sleepers normally, if they got to that stage. But
I believe they did. Yeah.
They could have. I mean, the two positions I served at were 6-week trips.
And were you married at this point, or you still
No, he's just a youngster enjoying it.
Yeah.
In Salisbury.
And when did you go from gunner or whatever you were up to sergeant?
Well, it was just. Well, I tell you what, I'll go back. in training, artillery would send guys down to School of Artillery in Potchefstroom in South Africa. So when I finished my basic training, and did a couple of ops, I was selected to do an advanced 25-pounder course with another group of mixed, regular and territorial down in Potch. I think there was about 20 of us went down. Of course, we went down by train as agricultural officers. And that train trip was an experience because you had to go through Botswana, all the way down to Joburg and then up to Potch. That was 4 weeks, sort of a master gunner's course in Potch. And that wasn't so nice because we were just treated like we were Dutchmen. we were given brown overalls and bloody standing in the rank and file with all the oaks at muster parade every morning, and then doing the course just like bloody oaks down there. But the second course I went on, which was 2 months or so, was for the 5.5s. Now 9 of us went down. We drove down in our own cars, and we spent. That was a bit better because we got our digs. We got privilege with the Air Force attached to the side of there. With we had access to the sergeant's mess there, so we got all the best food and good drinks, and we mingled with the good boys. So those 2 courses set me on my way to go up through the ranks. And I suppose I was one of those guys that used his initiative. I was always dodging the officers and the sergeants, and had something to do that was more important than what they wanted me to do. And I suppose using your initiative to do things gets you somewhere in the end.
Absolutely. Did you have to prod the tall Afrikaans on that Potchefstroom thing, or was it in English?
Not really. They did the courses in English for us, but sometimes they were very difficult to follow because I had some Afrikaans at school. I mean, at school we got Afrikaans or French, and I thought, well, shit, I'm not going to France in any bit of a hurry. I kind of regret that now, but I'm more likely to use Afrikaans. So yeah, you could pick up a few things. At first you should have seen us when I first went down there, and we were getting all the commands on the drill on marching. We're in Afrikaans.
Oh no!
And I can remember the one word they used for mark time. And it was mark soos jy loop nie, maar moenie loop nie. And directly translated, that's something like make as if you're walking but don't walk. And I said, that makes sense, but Jesus, what do and I think it was they told me, then they called out the command kiri puss, something like that, and that was their mark time. But mark soos jy loop nie, maar moenie loop nie. I thought, Jesus, you got to change that, But yeah, no, so that was good fun because we got up to some mischief down there as well. We went on tour. What goes on tour stays on tour.
Oh, absolutely. The only word I remember from Afrikaans at school was something like bliksem, as the teacher chased me down the corridor with a stick in his hand. Bit of a naughty bugger. I'm looking forward to talking about the cherry on the cake here, and that's Op Miracle. Can we go into that now? Tell us,
for sure.
Give us, rather than just slam bam, thank you, man, from when you fired the guns.
Yeah.
Tell us how did things go leading up to it? How did you hear about this op? What happened? Was it a very quick response to get up there?
Yeah. Okay. So at this stage, I was now had my 3 stripes, and now I could take things easy. So they select. This is an operation that was so hush hush, and we were called in, and the I can never pronounce this word. Artificers, which is your gun mechanics, had three gun tractors and 3 guns hitched up on the field, and we came in, and the guy said, "We're going on an operation, but we can't tell you anything more than that." And I looked and I said to now I'm a sergeant, so but they still, that's when there was a secret op, it was a secret op. And I said, with 3 guns. And they said, yeah, this op, we're only taking 3 guns. I said, okay, well, we'll take 3 guns. Right. And we were command post, all the guys were put together as a team. We got briefed. We're going on an op. We can't tell you where we're going. Just do as you're bloody told. But we all drove out, headed out to Nkoma Barracks. We were told you're going to Nkoma Barracks. Well, what was out in Nkoma Barracks? The famous Salute Scouts. And that's where we pulled in. and they shut the gates behind us. And we're put to one side and weren't briefed on anything. The drivers of the vehicles had to take the guns and the vehicles down to the workshops, and they were all sprayed. All the camo was sprayed off them, and they were all painted green. Now we started thinking something's on here, you know, and they was painted that to match for Lima vehicles. Anyway, there came a day and we headed off. I can't remember now whether we traveled down at night. I think we did, but we headed out to there's a road between the road that goes from Umtali to Inyanga. There's a Hondi Valley junction there. So we were taken down there and put into the forest there, this whole battle group. Still didn't know what was going on. It was all hush hush, you know. The battle group went down to Hondi and lined up on an old airstrip there, because I think it's the Rhodesia River.
That's right.
That runs there. Yeah. And now we started getting feedback. We're going to Mozambique. We're going into Mozambique. And like, that's the first time the guns had been taken across the border post. They'd crossed the borderline that I know of. And we were hauled up all the way back up the Gomo again to go back to the forest because there was too much haze and fog for the bombers to go in. So it was supposed to be, but by now I think information was leaking out. Anyway, when we did go down, all the infantry guys, the scouts and all those guys, they all crossed the river. There was supposed to be a crossing made the night before, but the engineers had problem doing that. But they headed off, and then we were kind of the armored cars, because they were advanced as well. The armored cars ran with the infantry guys, you know. Along comes artillery. Now we're laden with ammo. We've only got the 4.5s, and we've got the long wheel drive. We had two versions. We had the long wheel drive, and we had the shorter wheel drive 4.5, which was what we called a gun tractor, which was the back was divided in two. You had benches for 6 guys, and then the other part was ammunition. But on the longer 7.5, I think it was, you know, it was a longer version. They converted those so we could carry more ammo, but that had its own problems. So when we hit the river, we got bogged down, and there was a bulldozer there, and it had to tow every one of us through. And there's a clip of it of us being towed through. I've seen it on something, and it was quite a long way into the op. And in fact, when we got to Madison Square, which is where the guns were being set up, I think the boys were already in contact at, you know, the base of Hill 71 and Monte Cassino and that. I think they were starting to find. So the bombers, the Canberras, and the hunters had gone in. I don't know how, they were quite effective, but they knew we were coming. So they had quite an intricate trench system up there. But the guns got into position. We got set up, and almost immediately we were called upon. And Jesus, boy, that we were there 3 days, and we were never stopped firing for 3 days. It was, you know, so we set up and we started the action, and we got called on regular basis. And I've never moved the guns. You know, normally when you're firing, it's one target, it's one base camp, and you just adjust slightly. But we were adjusting, Jesus, all over the place.
I just want to pause you there, because for the sake of our foreign viewers and guys and ladies listening in that are not Rhodesian and didn't go through the war, the battle you were entering into was called Op Miracle, and it was to take out a hill complex just over the border from Umtali, and dislodge the terrorists from that area. It was an incredibly difficult battle. It was nicknamed Monte Cassino, after the Italian battle in Italy. And the terrorists were embedded in trenches up at the top of this hill. It was a steep climb for the RLI. Mortars were involved, Canberras, hunters. It was a full-on conventional battle. And we'll carry on hearing John's story now, where they were based at a place called Madison Square. I believe it was called Madison Square after someone dropped their medicine packet of cigarettes there, but that's only conjecture. They were based there and had a very interesting time, as John's about to tell us, not only engaging various targets within the casino complex, but as you will hear very shortly, tanks from Frelimo responded as well. And so I thought I'd just paint a picture of that before you carried on with your story, John.
Sure. Okay. So yeah. So we just to highlight a few things which will come into play later on is when we set up our guns, we often have time to do, well, you have to do what is called crest clearance, and normally you'll be given a couple of coordinates to get your barrels right, and then it's a real Heath Robinson way of doing it. As a number one, you might have an arc of a certain arc. So what you do is you set your barrel at your lowest level that you'd be firing at, and you open the breech and you get down on your haunches and you stare up through the barrel, and you'll get a guy on the trail moving it around slowly through the arch, and any trees that come into your view through the barrel have to be taken out. Otherwise you're gonna explode as you go, as if it hits a tree. So we were lucky in our position with 3 guns. We were in our sort of semicircle now, because we're missing the back gun that would normally form your diamond, and we had quite a big range, across the front, facing Hill 71, Monte Cassino. But we're lucky. There was only shrubs in front of us. There weren't any trees. But behind us, where the old burnt out store was, there was a lot of big gum trees. And during the one evening, when Frelimo sent up a column, including 4 or 5 old T-55 tanks, they were coming from behind us. And so the guns at night now had to swing 180 degrees around, and we hadn't crest cleared for that. But we knew one gun was severely affected by the gum trees behind us. So there's no chance of lopping trees and so on and so forth. So that gun was out of action. So we had to use 2 guns to try and turn a full column, well, together with the stop groups that were in. And there were a lot of those stop groups were RLI guys now. We had to turn or damage the tanks because they weren't an immediate threat to us in our gun position, because they were heading up to support Zanda in where they were being attacked. But that was extremely intense because it was night firing, and the OPs were getting, some of these guys, the tanks were not more than a couple of 100 yards away from them, and they're quite scary beasts, those tanks. I remember when the army got some back to Nkoma at one stage, not from that op, from somewhere else. And we went to go and see them. Jesus, they're vicious looking machines, when you see them up close. But anyway, it was quite a night of firepower from artillery. I can tell you that. That's why it sticks so much in my mind. And I know at the end of the day, we turned with the help of the stop groups and the artillery. That column was turned, and the Frelimo said, "No bloody ways." And whether it got away, but there was one definite hit on a tank, and a 25-pounder round coming down onto an armored tank doesn't do too much damage, but we managed to smoke one out. And I remember somebody telling me from, I think Labrador was the deck, control deck up in the air. There was just I may be wrong, but it was the top man of scouts. I won't mention names in case I'm wrong. Just shouted, "Get that effing tank!" I wanted. But when the sun rose, we had 2 rounds of ammunition left on the gun position, and we still had another day of fighting. And Artie was Artie. We were just another unit. A lot of people just thought we did bugger all except hang around at gun position. And so our support was never that great. But on that morning, my God, when you get 4 Bell helicopters at tree level coming through out of the sunset, fully laden with ammunition for you, you just know you've made the big time, And they came in banked into the front of the gun position, and we just hauled. I've never seen rounds get pulled out of the chopper so fast, where they were just hauled out, and because they're metal things, they're not that temperamental. Throw them on the ground, ready for the day's operations. But because I was thinking, I said to my lieutenant, I said, "What are we going to do? If we get called on a fire mission first light, we're snookered." He said, "Don't worry, we've called for reinforcements." I said, "Of what? Ammo?" He said, yeah. I said, how are they going to get it in? I said, that's not my problem. But the boys in blue came to the fore with those Hueys, boys. It's a lovely sound. You know, when you hear that coming over the thing. Yeah, and then that was, I think that, was it the second day? We also had a breech premature explosion on that op. That was not nice. And that's when a round goes off in the gun. And we had to change a barrel. We had to change a barrel on site. Never been done before with us. And that was brought in by Chopper as well, with a guy, and changed it over. And in fact, that was the day before the tanks that night. And if we hadn't have changed that barrel on the day, we would have been left with one gun. And I don't think we would have been able to turn that column around.
Wow, that's remarkable. How come the 5.5s weren't used there? Were they not in service at the time?
No, we had them. We got them very late. I think the Op America was 79, wasn't it?
Mm.
And I think we got our own 5.5s on loan, because I remember putting them back on the train to go back to South Africa. We got 8 of them, probably 77, maybe 78.
Mm.
And I just wish I'd been on a couple of op, because I tell you what, those would have frightened them gooks, because they were a beast of a machine, beast of a machine. I can remember being on course down in South Africa in Potchefstroom, and getting a ride and doing a little exercise on the gun range with their version of. They had a vehicle called a sextant, okay, and it was a tracked vehicle with a 25-pound gun mounted on it, and I think it had an airplane engine to drive it. You know, you'd start this thing off with cartridges. You know. It was built in South Africa. And at the time, there was talk about mounting something like a 5.5 on a becoming a self-propelled machine. And that came to fruition. I think it was called the G6. Now, some guys might correct me on it, but I can remember on my course, when I was doing a course on the 5.5s, they hadn't developed it yet, and it eventually became a very, very effective self-propelled gun.
Mm-hmm.
But the 5.5 was, I think we took it on that last final battle group, and and ended up at Kotwa when they had the trouble there. And we had the 5.5s were ready to go into action from the airstrip there to take out that camp.
Before we go on to that, let's go back to Op Miracle. that you painted that scene beautifully of the choppers coming over the hill.
Yeah.
The old American Hueys, and that must have been a sight to see. And what other targets did you have apart from the tanks during that period? What you were shooting up to the top of the hills?
Yeah, I think when the infantry guys came across resistance anywhere on their advancement, they would call in for support from the guns. And so that's why it was quite varied, because one minute you'd be firing over here, and then guys were encountering so it was mainly, I think it was when guys were popping their heads up above these, the trench system seemed to be really embedded high up on the top of that thing. I think it was one of the most complex systems that the intelligence had come across in our warfare. It was well thought out and well managed camp, and that's why it was quite it took longer than it was expected, and by some of the so we were supporting infantry and armored cars. Now, Jesus, those boys would go. I remember they were trying to drive up Monte Cassino, boy. What was the major's name? You might know. It was an American guy.
I think it was Murphy.
Was it Murphy?
Murphy or Winkler? I think it was Murphy.
Winkler. Yeah.
Winkler?
Yeah, he I can remember him wanting to just drive up the Gommel, but the bloody vehicle wouldn't get up there. But yeah, most of our targets on that, to backtrack to your earlier question, was small pockets of groups, but it was, the Canberras laid down a lot of fire, but these guys were so embedded in their trenches that they could come up again. So we were just putting down rounds all the time. It wasn't constant, but it was fire mission after fire mission, maybe hours, a couple of hours, and then more fire mission. Whereas previous ops, it's just been one fire mission, maybe and that's it. This was just different level. And oh God, I wish we had. I suppose it's not a good thing to say, but I just wish we were involved in more of those.
I've just finished interviewing Flight Lieutenant Michelle Sigmuller. His talk has just come online today. He was involved in that battle. He was one of the hunters that fired at the turrets up there on top in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I had a tape recording of that, as I mentioned in that interview. I had a tape recording given to me by an RLI guy, and you could hear the 30mm cannons on the hunters. You could hear the mortars. You could hear the artillery. It was the most amazing tape, one of those little cassettes that you had back in the 70s. And my daughter taped over it, so I lost that.
Oh,
and I've been, I've collected sort of things into my library. I'd love to have that back if anybody's got a copy of it. But it was the amount of firepower that was heard on that tape was unbelievable. It was a proper Second World War battle. And the hills were mutually supporting. They had AA guns up there, and they were firing at the RLI, trying to go up the hill. It was a spectacular battle.
It was incredibly intense. I mean, we were probably 7 or 8 miles away from the epicenter, but it was just constant chatter. The chatter on the radio was something else, but the gunfire, you could hear it just all day long. These guys must have put up tremendous resistance, but they were up against, dare we all say it, probably the greatest guerrilla fighting force in the world. You know, and credit to our infantry guys, they were something else. And to be part of an operation, I know it was a very small part of my time in the army, but it is something I cherish and I hold it. It's the only real memory I have of quite intense memory of it, and I remember driving out, tail end bloody Charlie's us boy at the back of the convoy, and the countryside was burning. The boys were set to burning it. And we were coming through with guns and ammo and driving through flames and heading back. And I got stuck one particular part on the road. I was actually driving the vehicle, and because they're long wheelbase, and you've got a gun, my bloody back wheels went, oh Jesus! And then you're holding up the column behind you, and the Oaks just want to get the bloody hell out of there and out. And it was just, at the time, it was just happening. But when I think back to it, and this is the first time I've spoken in as much detail with you than I have in 44 years, it just ignites the love of being in the Rhodesian Army.
Yeah, I can well respect that. On that audio tape, what amazed me is the amount of AKs firing up at the hunters. It was like paper tearing.
Yeah.
And then after about 4 strikes, it was they were getting very, very disinterested in shooting up at hunters. But what a wonderful experience, and something that will remain with you to your dying day. Are there any people that you'd like to give a mention to in this whole episode?
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Particularly who's no longer with us. He did officer training at the end, but I always refer to him as Sergeant Raymond Beamish. He was one of my mentors and a very brave man. And sorry. Yeah, we miss him all these years. AJ Arler's my mate. He was a good soldier and a good artilleryman, but in particular as well, the likes of Trevor Des Fountain, who was our OC at one stage, Evans, what is his first name? Can't remember. Frank Moxham, Lieutenant, and the best of all, Sergeant Major John Bolter. A fine Sergeant Major. Somebody could yell, but in the sergeant's mess after, he was great crack. And a couple of guys there that if it wasn't for JB, I don't think I would have enjoyed artillery as much as I did. We hated him. Everybody hates the Sergeant Major, but Jesus, he was a long-time soldier, and you see him now at remembrance parades and that, and you just think there's a true career soldier for you there. They were good people there.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, that we've done an interview with him.
Yes, you have. Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah. Yeah, great guy.
Because if I may, Tony, there's just, the lighter side of things, like artillery. We were involved in the 21 gun salute at opening of parliaments. So I've done that. I've done Rothel's funeral, so I was involved in that with the guns doing the salute. And my mate Ray Beamish, I was a sergeant at arms on when we buried him, and that was something I'm very proud of. We always had a gun carriage that was put aside for funerals of that nature, where they carry the coffin on a brace on the gun, and to take the pallbearers and the gun with the coffin on it down from Warren Hills down to the graveyard was a very proud moment.
Not to contradict that story, but or to sort of minimize it in any way, but when Rothel was alive, my brother, he was in the police. He was put on guard duty in a very resplendent uniform at the little caboose at the entrance to the president's house there.
Okay,
and when the president's car came in, which was, I think, an old Rolls Royce or something with the roof on, my brother Brian didn't salute properly or something. I think he was a little bit sloppy. And the car came to a grinding halt and it reversed up. And my brother told me afterwards, Rothel was a very short man.
Yes.
He didn't even have to bend his head as he walked across the back seat to the window, which was then wound down, and he shat all over my brother. So that's my brother's call to fame with our president. Yeah.
Well, my call to fame was coordinating the flyover and the guns doing the salute for him. I was tucked away somewhere on a radio.
Actually, because I'm 69 going on 90 in my brain, it was actually DuPont who did that. But anyway, it's a similar story. I'm sorry, I blew that one. Before we wind up, just the 5.5s at Kotwa, did they eventually open fire? What happened there?
No, we didn't. We didn't. The bloody monitoring force brought your man. What was his name? Was it a Nongo?
Rex Nongo. Yeah.
They brought him in, and he was taken down because it was they were all it was assembly point. They were coming in, bringing in their arms, but they were ready to cause nonsense. But Jesus, that would have been torture, because we were really anticipating. We had the messages on all the bloody rounds ready to go, boy, because we were setting airburst. Because the guns, 25-pounders had them as well. It was an airburst, so you could set a timer. So when it's all done by the tech guys, and so when the round's so many feet above the target, it explodes. And we had them all set, ready to go. And there's a famous photograph of the collective brown eye when he was leaving on that Hercules. There's all the scouts and the SAS were all lined up, and they gave him an almighty brown eye when he left.
Oh, I thought that photograph was for the monitoring force coming in. So that was actually for Nongo leaving.
It was either them coming in with him, because they all came in on one of those Hercules, I think it was.
Yeah, C-130.
Yeah. So it was either coming in or going out. I can't remember now. Yeah, but
it was coming in. Excellent.
Because we weren't really happy with those boys being here.
No. We've been going the amount of time that we normally allocate to this type of interview. So is there anything else you'd like to say in closing? Any special memory, anything else that you really enjoyed? Any other scene or anything like that?
Well, no, not it was just a good time to be in the army, I felt, apart from the worst side of it, the camaraderie and going out into Salisbury nightclubs and having a party and it was a really, really good time of my life was that. I think I was a naughty shit at school, but I think it made me a man I eventually became,
Okay, John, thanks very much for coming forward to talk. Would you agree with me that you found this talk quite cathartic? It's let something out of your system.
Oh, definitely. Tony, I stored a lot of my uniforms and my number ones and everything I got in the army in a trunk, and what photographs I did have. And unfortunately, in the early 80s, I got broken into, and the bastard seen a metal trunk, the old school trunk with 2 heavy locks on it, and they ran away with it. And I lost every single bit of stuff that I have that I wanted to keep dear to me. And of course, we weren't allowed to display those really. Well, we didn't want, most of us didn't want to take the chance of displaying it out in our houses in Zimbabwe because, you know, we were targets then. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed this. And if I may, if any of you out there get approached, it's worthwhile. And please tell us your stories.
Thank you for saying that, because I've found a resistance amongst Rhodesian servicemen to come on talk. But whereas South Africans that served in Rhodesia or just they're queuing up, they're bashing my door down to talk. So I don't understand this mindset. I know some guys saw some terrible things and they want to forget about it, but we can cut that out. We don't have to talk about that. We can talk about the interesting facets of their career or experiences that don't necessarily involve all the blood and guts. So I want to encourage people to please come and talk on this series. I spend a good couple of hours every single day of the week trying to recruit people, and it's very difficult. And then I have technical problems. I had a guy yesterday, took an hour and a half just to get him how to figure out to turn his camera on. But yeah, anyway, that's my moan for today.
Well, look, Tony, I can only say I was a bit skeptical at first because I didn't feel I had much to offer, because I always, you know, I saw the initial programs where the guys spoke a lot about actual operations and what they're involved in, and their memories are phenomenal. And if I can give advice to younger people, if you go into an army, keep a diary, because one day you will absolutely want to call back on those memories.
Yeah.
Because just wish I had. And I'm going to put it all down, all these experiences, and I'm going to put it away somewhere. And if my boys want to read it, it's there for them. If they don't, it's up to them.
That's wonderful. I want to encourage people who will never come on here to please write it down. I can get it published for them easy. But you've raised another point. You thought you didn't have a story to tell, and look what's come out of it. An amazing story. An amazing story. So I don't want people to undervalue what they've experienced. And I want a diversity. I mean, I'm longing to interview farmers, and I just don't seem to get anybody coming forward, because they were amazing people. And their wives who stood alone.
You know?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, look, I certainly hope when you approached me, and I got a hold of the guys in artillery, and they said, go for it, take whatever pictures you need to. I thought about it and I started writing things down, and I thought, I've got an A4 page here.
Yeah. What
can I make of it? But you presented very well, Tony, and you, by prompting me along the way, it's helped me get through. I can talk far too much, but I felt I know it's released something from me. It's released something I'm very proud of, and I want to talk about it. You know, and I think that'll put me at ease. I know that.
Wonderful. And part of getting rid of post-traumatic stress syndrome is to talk. You know, that's what a psychologist does, a psychiatrist. When you talk, something comes out of you, you realize that you're not alone, you feel forgiven in many instances. And so, you know, there's a lot to talk about. I just want to encourage guys to come forward.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope you have more success.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to end now, and thank you very much for volunteering to talk. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you, Tony, and have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.